You're listening to the Heart Lessons Podcast with me, Sarah Ritchie. Real women, real stories, real faith. Hi there, faithful podcast listeners. Today you're going to be hearing from my friend Sarah, and I cannot say enough great things about Sarah and all of the wisdom that she has spoken into my life over the years. She just has this way of communicating truth that is, it just speaks right to your heart in a gentle, kind, but very direct way, and I just appreciate that so much. And I can't tell you how many times I have gone back to words that she's spoken to me, or words that I've overheard her speaking to someone else, and she is just a wealth of knowledge and wisdom, and I am so glad that she is a part of my life and someone that I can go to for guidance and wisdom, and to just share my heart. And she can help point me in the right direction and help sort out my feelings and give me a verse and a good word. And I just appreciate her so very, very much. And I know you are going to be blessed by what Sarah has to share with you today about some hard things that she had to go through, some really hard questions that she was dealing with. And she's going to talk about that today. So I know you're going to really enjoy hearing from Sarah. Thank you, Sarah, so much for coming to talk with me tonight. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So you just recently came back from visiting your family in Africa.
I did.
That's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Not many of us have to do that.
It was a really special trip. Yeah, they're doing really well, and it was just awesome to spend quality time with them and see what they're up to day to day.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you have to get a ton of shots before you left?
Not this time. It was really nice. Yeah, and most of the, kind of big epidemics, they weren't so worried about this time either. So very, very nice to just go through those lines quickly.
That's always good. Did you see any great African animals?
Yeah. This one time we were on safari and they let us get out of the car for a few minutes to eat a quick snack or whatever. And then all of a sudden they were really encouraging us to quickly get back in the car, and that's because there was a lion just kind of wandering around. Okay. Thanks. We'll close the doors. It was awesome.
Yeah. You don't want to be the lion's snack, right?
Yes. We were hungry. He could stay
that
way.
Yeah. That's not part of the safari.
Yes.
No humans were harmed during the
that
safari.
really dampens the people's enthusiasm for it. Came to us, yeah.
So I know the Lord's been doing some stuff in your heart, and I am excited to hear about it. So where should we start?
Well, I'm really excited too because, to be perfectly honest, I've just been pretty sad for a while, and so it's been sweet to see God just changing my heart, to be all the way honest. I think that's really the only way to describe it, and teaching me how to have joy again. So I feel kind of silly sometimes sharing what's been going on in my life because so many people in the world have it really, really difficult, and even going to see my family in Africa and seeing how the majority of the world lives is really sobering, and people often talk about the perspective that's gained by trips like that, but an author that I've read recently was saying that she too struggled with sharing her story because she's like, well, they're middle-class white girl tragedies, but I'm a middle-class white girl and they're my tragedies.
Yeah,
so
it still hurts.
Yeah.
It still hurts.
So, and I'm thankful that God meets me too. He cares about me as well. So I guess to start, probably not 2 years ago, about 5 years ago, I lost a job that I really loved and that made me come alive. I was a middle school teacher, and it was my first real teaching job, and I loved that. And around the same time, the man I loved and thought I was going to be with forever, I found out that he was lying to me about a lot of things. And we broke up for a long time, and all in the same time frame. My family, who I'm really close to, was moving away. So in a lot of ways, it felt like God was just kind of gutting me. I was kind of just starting to wonder, like, do you like me? Because a lot of these things make up who I am, and they're just going away. So I'm not really sure what my day-to-day life looks like without my calling and my passion, the man I was going to share my future with, and my family, who have been building dear relationships all these years. So then on top of that, some friends were really hurt by some evil and damaged people, and I took a short-term job with a low-income school with some challenged students, and needed to say goodbye to them every day, put them on the bus to go to people in places that were really horrifying. Like, one of my 10-year-old students sent me a suicide note on his way out the door, and that really threw me for a loop. Yeah. Just realizing that my personal disappointments and hurt were depressing. You know, I was living under a dark cloud, but their real tragedies were just making me angry. Like, I could not understand why God would let kids be hurt ongoing. And I mean, we've all struggled with the system at some point, you know, trying to help people get help, but I wish things got fixed so much more quickly. I wish all kids lived in safe and happy homes, you know, all those kinds of things. And truly, I was just upset at how their futures were sabotaged. I felt like I was set up for success, and the family that I was put in and the education that I received, it's just all huge blessings. And I know we all struggle with kind of voices in our head at some level, but these kids were going to have to do so much unlearning and rebuilding in order to have any kind of emotional, mental, spiritual health. And that was just devastating. So of course they were in my remedial class, you know, because there was just so much work to be done. So that really sparked some big questions. You know, so how can God allow this? What does it mean for us to say that he's everywhere, but then for him to not stop these things? How are we supposed to trust the goodness of God in all this? And then maybe even a little bit more sinister than that, like, is there really darkness around every corner? Is it every life turn that it just gets harder? Between personal tragedies of friends, like church leaders and Christian friends who aren't what they seem, stories on the news, I've just started to hear this trend of mature believers that I respect say that they're not even surprised anymore by the people caught doing horrible things to each other. And how are we supposed to live in hope and trust when we're just waiting for the other shoe to drop? You know, even in our relationships with others, that's doesn't really connect with those verses in the Bible that talk about our hope and our never-ending joy. And then probably the question that weighed heaviest on my heart was just, how can heaven really make up for the way that people suffer here? What does it mean for God to unmake all that evil that was transpiring? Like, how can there be justice that late in the game? But then it was just eerie how quiet God became when my heart was just breaking with these questions. And it's not even like I was doubting, at least not initially. I was asking the questions honestly, like seeking understanding. When someone that you love, you catch them doing something that looks pretty sketchy, initially you kind of extend that faith and trust, like, I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation, but when there's just not, and still not, at some point you've got to start considering other alternatives. Like maybe it's as sketchy as it first looked, and I just wasn't sure what God was up to in all of that. So the longer that the days stretched on and with no real answer or peace from God, the more frustrated I became. And if I'm being honest, I don't have all the answers yet, but some real shifts in my heart began happening over the last few months, especially. So a lot of this is really recent change, and it's a real relief. But first, I think, was the realization that while there may be darkness around every corner, God's also around every corner. At first, that really bothered me to think that God was affiliated or associated with truly awful things. But then I came to realize that no evil is as bad as it could be. That's hard to grasp because some people live through some really nightmarish stuff.
Yeah.
But it was really important to me to have that settled in my heart, that wherever there's secret evil, there are also secret miracles. You know, God is with each of us, even in our darkest moments. And even when we can't tell our stories, to protect some shameful things, we're also not telling some of the sweet things that God's done, because he's there too.
Yeah.
So he'll be with the people we love too in their dark places. But then that led to my next big wrestling match with God, because if God's presence restrains evil, so it's never as bad as it could be, why doesn't he restrain it more?
Yeah.
I mean, we
Like,
could
just
still
stop
gossip.
it, for example.
Yeah,
You know?
that'd be awesome. So good. And
Why
you hear
not?
stories of that too, that
Yeah.
God does stop evil sometimes, and there's no other explanation except that he showed up
Miracle.
and wow, it just was not permitted to continue. And then you hear other stories where there are years without rescue, you know. So how does all of that fit together? And truly, I don't have an answer to that one. But the way that I've found to live with that question, instead of that just being this huge barrier between me and God, or me and hope even, is that maybe I'm not old enough to understand that yet. And God as my father, as a parent, that's a really appropriate response sometimes, is to say, you know, you truly wouldn't understand yet. And I think that's consistent with Scripture. We serve an infinite God who knows everything and lives outside of time. I think it's conceivable that he could know things that I don't, and
Possible.
and even know when he might be able to share some answers that I couldn't handle right now. And people of faith often call this the mystery of God, which is hard to hear when you're struggling with fear. Sometimes that feels like code for the terrifying unknown. But I'm not sure that that's being fair to the work of God that we have seen, especially knowing that if we believe the gospel at all, that he honestly gave the most to make sure that we could know what hope was and to be in relationship with him. So I think it's fair to say I'll wait until you think I'm ready. It is that love that finally broke through to me, through that silence and the anger in my heart. Ultimately, we can rest even with the things that we really don't understand, because we matter to God. That's written all over the universe, but I think even more personally, it is written on our hearts. I think that's the big question that we have, is what am I here for? And it's to know and be known by God. So that's why we can trust him with our lives and our hearts and our futures and the people we love. It's because he loves us. And the cool part of that story is part of the reason why God's love got my attention again was through the reconciliation and healing of my relationship with Jonathan.
Yeah.
And we're planning to get married, and it's been one of the biggest joys of my life to watch God's work up close there, and to see to be honest, the paving the road and building trust again with Jonathan gave me a pattern for building trust again with God.
That's
Just
great.
in a real face-to-face,
Yeah.
flesh and blood relationship. I learned that that's possible, and so it was very encouraging to feel. Some of the scariest spots in my relationship with Jonathan felt almost comforting when it came to those scary spots in my relationship with God, because I thought, oh, we can get to the other side of this.
Yeah.
We can be in a better place, God and I. So that ultimately helped me to realize that God doesn't just use people's bad choices and heartbreak, he transforms them. Which brings me to heaven, because if God is who he says he is and the gospel's real, then good will swallow up evil. It won't even be significant. It'll be too small to remember. Life overcomes death and lasts forever, so death is just short. And there's a place with no more fear or pain or tears or goodbyes. So when I struggled so hard with those things, like, why is there so much pain? Why is death so wrong? Why do goodbyes feel like they're just messed up?
Yeah.
It's because we were actually created for a place with none of those things. And that's real hope. I'm not just crazy for wanting things that I can never have.
Yeah.
We just have to wait a little bit. Because God says he'll make all things right. So I hope someday all my students hear that God will never leave them or forsake them. You know, I was only with them a short time and tried to love them as best I could, but they can have a real relationship with a God who transforms their brokenness into glory and real joy. But truly, all this came about because God was helping me to be honest with him and to even get to a much deeper level of honesty with myself than I had been before. So as much as I was asking genuine questions, when I got down to the heart of it, what I had been asking him for was solutions. But what I really wanted deep down inside was to believe that he wasn't going to leave me. I was so afraid of finding out that there are places in our lives that God doesn't go. But ultimately I found that the silence was the answer to the realest question of all. Because he was silent, because he was being a good friend and weeping with me when I was weeping. He knew that there weren't any words that I could hear. And so he knew my heart better than I did, and he just grieved with me. I didn't want to be honest about how much this was breaking my heart. I just wanted to fix it.
Yeah.
And I wanted him to fix it and didn't trust the timeline he was operating on. But God loves the real us. So when we actually share the most vulnerable and scary parts of ourselves, like, I just can't think of a scarier question to ask than, will you stay with me? But he, of all people, can make us beautiful on the inside and change our fear into love. So what's brought the joy back in my heart is, while getting involved deeply in people's lives is messy and scary and may involve coming around some dark corners, watching love replace fear in their lives is just about the most beautiful thing in the world. God will never leave me, not even in the darkest place. He's in our yesterdays and in our tomorrows, so we don't have to be afraid to face our past or our future. And love is never wasted, even when we can't see what good it does. So one of my favorite songs has a chorus that I basically pinned everywhere, like on my desk, on my mirror, in my Bible.
It's your life words.
Yes. It said, there will come a time, you'll see, with no more tears, when love will not break your heart, but dismiss your fears. So get over your hill and see what you find there, with grace in your heart and flowers in your hair. So I love that picture of hope and a place of real beauty, where love's not wasted.
Yeah. I remember, I don't know at what point you were in your, really sad place, but right after Evie passed away and we went to the winter retreat together as youth leaders, I remember we were like sitting down, like crying together, because you were going through what you were going through and I was going through what I was going through, and I think we were both wrestling with some really, really, really hard stuff.
Yeah.
So it's kind of special to see us both, kind of on the other side, getting out of it. So.
Yeah. I was really grateful. At that time, it seemed like there were several friends who, while we weren't going through the same struggles exactly, we were all asking some pretty heavy things of the Lord,
Yeah.
and we're grieving together, and that meant a lot. The Lord's even kind to give us friends who are walking with us, because sometimes when the dearest people to you are super happy when you're super sad, it can really cause rifts in a relationship.
Yeah.
So I was grateful for you
Yeah, that
in
was.
that time.
I do remember that. I remember the question that I was like, that kept coming to my mind that I felt like I shouldn't be asking God. I don't know if you remember. I remember telling you, but I was thinking, and I didn't want to ask God, but it just kept like I could not ignore it until I finally like laid it down at His feet, you know. But I was thinking, what were you thinking when I was holding my dead baby? Like, I mean, that is a serious question, and I was like, I kept trying to push it aside, like I shouldn't be asking that, I shouldn't be asking that, but finally, like, I could not hold it back anymore. And just like you said, God weeps with us. I feel like what He spoke to my heart was, Sarah, what would you do if you saw Micah suffering that way? And of course I know what I would do. I would be down there weeping with him, and I feel like the Lord told me I was doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that just, just that picture of like, God is also grieved when we are deeply grieved, and somehow He's also in it, and it's part of His plan for us, but He's like in it grieving with us. So
That just meant the world to me, because I was honestly afraid that God was too big, that He'd forgotten how small I was, and how He had this great big plan, but it was killing me.
Yeah.
And so,
like you got lost somewhere in the...
Yeah, and I just wasn't keeping up, so that question of, will you stay with me, you know, that was a big deal. I was really afraid that He'd moved on without me and was just expecting me to catch up, you know. Like, somehow you're walking with your kids and one's far behind. Got places to be, people to see. But that wasn't it at all. Like, He never asked me to go through something that He wasn't willing to go through Himself. So as much as my heart was breaking, His was too. So when things were my portion, they were His portion too, and that was a game changer.
Yeah, that God is right there with you. Yeah. Do you feel like, I guess I felt like one of the things that really helped me stop, I don't want to say stop grieving, but helped me out of my grief was when Jossie was born, or like getting pregnant with her, which happened about a year after, like about when Evie would have turned 1 year. And so you said a lot of what is helping you, you know, build the bridges with God, like trust with the Lord again, is you're mending your relationship with Jonathan.
Yeah.
So, does it feel kind of, I don't know, like, it's like you need that little bit of hope or something to like help you feel, like to help you get that feeling back that you can trust God. Like somehow we're so like, as humans, I think we're really emotionally dependent, and when we feel emotionally empty, it's like God, where are you? I can't find you. And somehow like when He gives us that little bit of feeling, like that little bit of good feeling back, somehow it's a spark of hope. I don't know.
Absolutely. It's a huge difference.
Yeah. And it also makes me feel guilty. I'm like, why? Like, why am I finally feeling like I can trust God now that He's given me something good? But maybe that's part of it.
I wondered about that too, and I don't know if I have a complete answer, but at the same time, God does know how He made us, and we do matter to Him, and the Bible says that all good gifts come from Him, and I don't know that it's really more spiritual to suffer. I think that we're able to be thankful in all things, including the good things. You know, those are evident. They're evidence to our frail hearts of how good God is. And I know truly, without exaggeration, every day that I have with Jonathan is a reminder that God's real. He, maybe I am just very weak and needed the no kidding everyday reminder, but
me too.
It's huge. I mean, in some of the darkest moments when I thought, but God brought this back about. I wonder what else He could do, because this really did feel all the way impossible. I don't know if you read any dating or marriage book, they don't usually speak well of breaking up.
Oh, right.
You know, that's
Yeah.
not usually a building block of your relationship.
Step one,
Yes.
just get away from each other. No, just kidding.
Yes, for years. You should definitely be especially angry with each other.
Yeah, no, I've never read that in
Yeah,
any marriage book.
exactly. But that in and of itself has really humbled my expectations of how God would use different parts of my life, because it was ugly. Jonathan helped me to kind of figure out what I wanted to say tonight, and we went through several rewrites of our story, and it was funny because we had this moment last time where we thought, our story's kind of ugly. I don't really know if I want to tell it. But at the same time, I think that's just the coolest, to see how it was impossible and God brought us together, and I'm so thankful. It's just a living witness. He is, this person that's just wandering around that I bump into in the kitchen,
Yeah.
Proof that God's real.
That's awesome. It's definitely beauty from ashes personified.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, I think it's pretty romantic. I guess I can say at this point, that's why you guys went to Africa. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You could ask your dad for your hand in marriage, which is like, I don't know. I feel like you could make a movie out of that. I feel like
it was quite a moment when Jonathan came in to just tell me, how it had gone. You're just floored.
That's so great.
Yeah. God is amazing. Because I guess that's one of the cool parts. He didn't just change my heart and Jonathan's heart. He changed our family's hearts and our church. And I mean, there were a lot of people who needed to be convinced that this was a good idea, and God has done that, which I think is wondrous.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome. There's this, I don't know, I guess it's a quote that my mom has on like a little plaque in our spare bedroom, and when I was a teenager and like training for field hockey, I would always run on the treadmill and like stare at this plaque. And I made my mom text me a picture of it because I wanted to read what it says.
That's great.
And I wonder what your thoughts are on it. It says what God has promised. God has not promised skies always blue, flowers-strewn pathways all our lives through. God has not promised sun without rain, joy without sorrow, peace without pain. But God has promised strength for the day, rest for the laborer, light on the way, grace for the trial, help from above, unfailing sympathy, undying love.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's
Kind of
awesome.
sums it up pretty
it really
well.
does. I love that we're doing this close to Easter. I've been thinking a lot about what resurrection means, bringing dead things back to life, and I feel like pretty much anything Easter related has just been making me so weepy this time around, because my heart was so dead, and us living and doing all the things that I was supposed to do, but really every day feels so special because my heart's come back to life, and that even the piece that we've picked for our processional down the aisle at our wedding is about beauty from ashes. It's a song called The Firebird, about a phoenix, and with that kind of picture of God's resurrection of all of our dead things into something that's so beautiful that it makes us forget about death in the first place. So I'm really so thankful that that's our story. We know that.
Well, I think that's really beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your heart.
Thank you so
don't
much
take
for
it
having
lightly
me.
at all. It's awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your heart and sharing how the Lord has redeemed some of those really hard things that you were going through. And I rejoice with you. I'm so happy for you. And thank you very much for being willing to share those really deep parts of your heart that at one time seemed really scary, but now you can see the redemption and thank you very, very much for doing that for us. And thank you to you for listening and for your support of the Heart Lessons podcast. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating and review. I would really, really appreciate it. And you can also listen on my blog, lifeandgrace.com. You can also find the podcast on YouTube and listen there. And if you have any questions or want to email me about anything, please feel free. Sarah J. Rieke, that's Rieke @gmail.com. And I would be happy to talk with you and hear some of your story as well. So thank you to you all for listening, and I will talk to you again next week.